A man rides for 6 days through the Colorado heat, a piece of paper in his pocket telling him he's a landowner. He's come to claim his inheritance, a remote mountain lodge left to him by an uncle he barely knew. He pulls his horse to a stop, and a strange feeling crawls up his spine. Smoke is trickling from the chimney. That's not right. His uncle Ezekiel was dead. The letter said so. So who was inside his property? His name is Magnus Thornfield, and he's seen enough of the world to know when a situation stinks, and this one smelled like trouble and day-old gunpowder. He swings off his horse, his boots crunching on the gravel, his eyes locked on the heavy wooden door. He doesn't even get the chance to knock. The door swings open, and that's when he sees her, a young woman, maybe 20 years old, with fire in her eyes and a Winchester rifle in her hands. The barrel is aimed squarely at his heart. She's beautiful. In a way, a storm is beautiful. Wild, dangerous, untamed. She chambers around. The click-clack of the rifle is the only sound in the mountain air. And then she speaks 5 words that will change his life forever. You belong to me now. Magnus raises his hand slowly. This is no frightened girl. The way she holds that rifle, the set of her jaw. She's seen things. She's a survivor. My name is Magnus Thornfield, he says, his voice steady. This lodge belonged to my uncle Ezekiel. He passed, left it to me. He watches her eyes. They're the color of emeralds and just as hard. There's a flicker of something in them, but it's not recognition. It's calculation. She's weighing his life in the balance. Ezekiel never mentioned a nephew, she says, her voice cold as a mountain stream. Well, he had one, and I have the papers to prove it. The standoff stretches. The wind whistles through the pines, carrying the smell of rain. A storm is coming. Magnus can feel it in his bones. This woman, this lodge, this whole situation, it's a storm, and he's just ridden right into the eye of it. Papers can be forged, she says, her grip on the rifle unyielding. Doesn't change the fact that this place is mine now. I'm not here to hurt you, Magnus says, trying to sound reasonable. But how do you reason with a cornered wolf? She looks him up and down, searching for a lie. He can see the exhaustion in her eyes, a deep weariness that has nothing to do with a lack of sleep. This woman has been running on pure grit for a long, long time. After a moment that feels like an eternity, she lowers the rifle. Just an inch. But it's enough. Wipe your boots, she says, stepping aside. It's not an invitation. It's a command. And Magnus, for reasons he doesn't fully understand, obeys. He steps inside and the world outside disappears. The lodge is a fortress. Hand-built furniture, thick rugs, a massive stone fireplace. It smells of wood smoke and old leather. He feels like he's stepped back in time. He was a good man, the woman says, her voice suddenly softer. She's talking about Ezekiel. You knew him well? Magnus asks, pushing aside a curtain to look out at the valley below. The view is breathtaking, isolated, defensible. He saved my life, she says simply. There's a story there, a dark one. Magnus knows better than to push. Everyone in this territory has secrets they'd kill to keep buried. He's no different. How long have you been here? He asks instead. 3 months. Alone? Her back stiffens. I can take care of myself. I wasn't suggesting otherwise, he says, turning from the window. Just seems like a lonely life. She lets out a short, bitter laugh. Better lonely than dead. The words hang in the air, heavy and sharp. He sees the way her hand never strays far from the Colt. 45 holstered at her waist. He sees the way she keeps glancing at the windows, scanning the tree line. This isn't a home. It's a hideout. What are you running from? He asks, his voice low. Who says I'm running? Experience him, he says. You're not just hiding up here. You're fortified. The question is, who are you fortified against? For the first time, the fierce mask on her face cracks. The weight of her secret seems to crash down on her all at once, and she sinks into a chair, looking impossibly young. The fight goes out of her, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching despair. He sits down across from her. It doesn't matter, she whispers. They'll never find me here. Magnus presses. She looks up, and the look in her eyes is ancient. It's the look of someone who has seen the absolute worst of what men can do to each other. Men who think they own things that can't be owned, she says. Men who don't like being told no. A cold knot forms in Magnus's stomach. He knows exactly the kind of men she's talking about. The kind that wear badges. Sheriff Blackwood, she breathes, and the name itself seems to poison the air in the room. The name hits Magnus like a physical blow. Sheriff Blackwood of Pueblo, a man whose reputation for cruelty and corruption was known throughout the territory. A man who ruled his town with an iron fist in a shallow grave. Crossing him was a death sentence. "What did you do?" Magnus asks, though he's starting to suspect he already knows. "I witnessed something I shouldn't have," she says, her voice barely a whisper. The sheriff and two of his deputies, robbing the Wells Fargo office. They killed the clerk, a young man, barely 18. They shot him down and tried to make it look like a gang did it. But I was there. I saw everything. Magnus feels a chill that has nothing to do with the coming storm. This is bad. Worse than he could have imagined. "You testified against him?" She nods. "I went to the federal marshal, told him what I'd seen. He promised he'd protect me, that he'd investigate." She trails off, a haunted look in her eyes. "But Blackwood, he has friends everywhere. The marshal was found dead 2 days later, shot in an alley. They called it a robbery, but his wallet was still full of cash. So the one man who could have helped her was dead, and now she was a loose end. A loose end a man like Blackwood would be desperate to tie up, permanently." "So you ran," Magnus states. It's not a question. "Ezekiel found me on the trail. My horse had gone lame. I was half dead from a snowstorm. He brought me here. He said I could stay as long as I needed." She looks around the lodge, her fortress, her prison. "I've been surviving ever since." Surviving, not living. There's a difference. Magnus sees a woman trapped by fear, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door that won't be a long-lost nephew. It will be the devil himself come to collect his due. Thunder rumbles in the distance. The storm is getting closer. "You can't hide here forever," Magnus says gently. "Why not?" she retorts, the fire returning to her eyes. "Ezekiel did it for 20 years. "Ezekiel wasn't a 20-year-old woman with her whole life ahead of her," he shoots back. "My whole life?" She laughs, a sound completely empty of humor. "You mean the life where I'm looking over my shoulder every second of every day? The life where I can't trust anyone? That's not a life. It's a cage." Magnus stands and walks to the fireplace, poking at the dying embers. The air grows cold. The world outside darkens. What if there was another way? She looks at him, suspicion etched on her face. "What are you? Some kind of gunslinger? A bounty hunter? What makes you think you can succeed where a federal marshal failed?" He turns to face her, and for the first time she sees it. A flicker of something truly dangerous in his dark eyes. Something that makes the hair on her arm stand up. It's a cold, hard resolve that chills her to the bone. "Let's just say," he says, his voice a low growl, "I have some experience dealing with men like Blackwood." "What kind of experience?" "The kind," he says, "that usually ends with them in a pine box." The casual way he says it sends a shiver down her spine. This isn't just talk. This man, Magnus Thornfield, is more than just an heir claiming his property. He's a hunter, and she realizes with a jolt that he didn't just stumble into this hornet's nest by accident. He came here looking for it. "You're talking about murder," Cassandra whispers, the reality of his words sinking in. "I'm talking about justice," Magnus corrects her. "Sometimes they look the same. Lightning flashes, illuminating his face. He's not a savior. He's an executioner. And he's come to her mountain for a reason that has nothing to do with a dusty old deed." "Why?" she asks, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would you risk your life for a stranger? What's in it for you?" He's quiet for a long moment, the silence broken only by the sound of the rain lashing against the windows. The storm has arrived. They're trapped now in this lodge, with their secrets and their shared enemy. "Blackwood," Magnus finally says, and the name is a curse on his lips. "He took something from me, too." The admission hangs between them, a shared wound. This isn't about her anymore. It's about him. It always was. What did he take? She asks. He meets her gaze, and the grief in his eyes is so raw, so deep, it feels like she's staring into an open grave. He killed my brother. The two words change everything. Suddenly the pieces click into place. The hard edge in his voice. The hunter's look in his eyes. This isn't a chance encounter. It's fate, or something darker. My brother Thomas was a deputy marshal, Magnus explains, his voice tight with a grief that is still fresh, even after all this time. One of the few good ones left. He was investigating corruption in Pueblo 2 years ago. Cassandra's blood runs cold. The same investigation. The very same, Magnus confirms. He sent me a letter, said he was close to exposing a whole network. He said Blackwood was the ringleader. 2 days later, Thomas was found dead in a brothel. They said a jealous husband killed him. But Thomas, he never went to places like that. And the husband vanished into thin air. It was all connected. Her witness account, the murder of the federal marshal, the death of Magnus's brother. It was all part of the same web of lies and death, with Sheriff Blackwood sitting right in the middle, like a spider. This wasn't just about a robbery. It was about a criminal empire. So you're not here for the lodge, she says, stating the obvious. The lodge was just an excuse to come to this part of the country without raising suspicion, he admits. Finding you here, that was an unexpected complication. Or maybe, he adds, looking at her intently, it was a sign. He walks over to a cabinet and pulls out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He pours a generous measure into each, the amber liquid catching the firelight. He hands one to her. Their fingers brush, and an unexpected jolt passes between them. We need a plan, he says, his voice all business now. The grief is still there, but it's been channeled into a sharp, deadly focus. We need evidence, something that can't be buried or dismissed. How? Cassandra asks, taking a sip of the whiskey. It burns, a welcome heat against the cold fear in her stomach. Everyone who could testify against him is dead. Not everyone, Magnus says. Men like Blackwood, they get sloppy. They leave trails. There have to be other witnesses, other victims, people who are too scared to talk. We just have to find them and convince them. And who do we take this evidence to? She challenges. Another marshal who'll end up in an alley? There are still honest men, he insists. We just have to be smart about it. And if we're wrong, if we trust the wrong person? He looks at her, and the intensity in his gaze steals her breath. Then at least we'll die fighting instead of hiding. The words strike a chord deep inside her. For 3 months, she's been hiding, cowering, living in fear. The thought of fighting back, of taking the fight to Blackwood, is terrifying, but it's also liberating. You're talking about starting a war, she says. I'm talking about finishing one, he replies. One that Blackwood started when he killed my brother, when he killed that clerk, when he decided he was above the law. Lightning flashes again, and in the sudden, stark light, Cassandra sees her own reflection in the window pane. A ghost, pale and haunted. Is this who she wants to be for the rest of her life? What makes you think we can succeed where trained lawmen failed? She asks, one last shred of doubt clinging on. Because, he says, his voice low and certain, we have something they didn't. What's that? Each other. The simple words hang in the air, filled with a terrifying, exhilarating promise. He barely knows her. She barely knows him. But in this isolated lodge with a storm raging outside and a common enemy hell-bent on seeing them both dead, they are all each other has. I know you're brave enough to stand up to him, Magnus continues as if reading her mind. You already did. I know you're smart enough to survive out here alone, and I know you're skilled enough with that rifle to make any man think twice. He smiles, a rare, fleeting thing that transforms his face. You're still alive. Men like Blackwood don't usually leave loose ends untied for this long. You must be doing something right. A warmth spreads through her chest, chasing away some of the cold. It's been a long time since anyone saw her as strong, instead of as a victim. I'm proposing a partnership, he says. You know his territory, his associates. I know how to hunt men like him. Together, we might just have a chance. Partners in what? She asks, though she already knows the answer. Justice, he says. And there it is. The choice. Continue to hide and wait for death to find her, or stand and fight and ride out to meet it head on. If we do this, she says, her voice steady now, there's no going back. He'll never stop hunting us. He's already hunting you, Magnus points out. At least this way, you get to hunt him back. She can't argue with his logic. She takes a deep breath, the smell of rain and pine filling her lungs. The decision is made. The fear is still there, a cold knot in her gut. But now it's mixed with something else, a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance. All right, Thornfield, she says, meeting his gaze. You've got a partner. He raises his glass. To justice. She clinks her glass against his. To justice. They drink, a pact sealed in whiskey and shared grief. Outside, the storm begins to pass. But inside the lodge, a new storm is just beginning to gather. A storm of vengeance that will sweep down from the mountains and tear through the corrupt heart of Pueblo. But as they lower their glasses, a new sound cuts through the night. It's not the wind. It's not the rain. It's the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats on the trail. And they're coming fast. Instantly, they both freeze. The pact they just made, the hope they just found, it all evaporates. Reality comes crashing back in. They're not alone. Magnus is on his feet, his Colt already in his hand. Cassandra grabs her Winchester, her movements fluid and practiced. Their brief moment of alliance is already being tested. Who else knows about this place? Magnus whispers, his eyes darting to the windows. No one, Cassandra insists, her voice tight with panic. Ezekiel was a hermit. He never had visitors. The hoofbeats are closer now. More than one horse. At least 3 or 4 riders, pushing their mounts hard up the treacherous, rain-slicked trail. They're not casual travelers, they're hunting. They move as one, without speaking. Magnus douses the main lamp, plunging the room into shadow, lit only by the flickering embers in the fireplace. Cassandra takes up a position by the front window, peering through a crack in the curtains. Magnus covers the back. They're not carrying lanterns, Cassandra reports, her voice a strained whisper. They know the trail. They've been here before. The implication hangs heavy in the air. If they've been here before, then Ezekiel wasn't as isolated as he seemed. Or worse, someone knew Cassandra was here. Magnus feels a cold dread creep up his spine. Had Blackwood found her already? Was their war over before it even had a chance to begin? The riders pull up just outside the lodge, their horses panting and steaming in the cool night air. The jingle of spurs, the creak of leather. Then a heavy boot steps onto the porch, and a fist hammers on the door. Cassandra McKenna! A voice booms, a voice accustomed to authority. We know you're in there. This is Marshal Wayncroft, United States Marshal Service. Open this door. Cassandra and Magnus exchange a look of disbelief. The U.S. Marshals? Here? Now? It makes no sense. It's a trick, Magnus mouths silently. Blackwood's men. Cassandra nods, her knuckles white on the stock of her rifle. The federal marshal who tried to help her ended up dead. Why would these be any different? McKenna! The voice shouts again, more insistent this time. We have a warrant for your arrest. Arrest? Not for her testimony? The voice clarifies and the words hit Cassandra like a shotgun blast to the chest. A warrant for the murder of Elias Vance at the Pueblo Wells, Fargo. Cassandra stumbles back from the window, her face ashen. Murder? They're accusing her of murdering the clerk? The boy she tried to save? It's a frame-up. A brilliant, vicious one. Blackwood isn't just trying to silence her. He's trying to discredit her, to turn her into the villain of the story. If she's a murderer, then her testimony against him is worthless. Don't open it, Magnus hisses, moving to her side. But then the man outside says something else. Something that changes the entire equation. We have your father's journal, Cassandra. We know you came here to find what Ezekiel hid. Cassandra freezes. Her father's journal? The one he was carrying when he died? The one she thought was lost forever? And what did he mean? What Ezekiel hid? The old man had never mentioned hiding anything. This isn't about the robbery anymore. It's about something else entirely, something her father and Ezekiel were involved in. Before Magnus can stop her, she calls out, her voice trembling but clear. How do you know about my father? He was working with us, the marshal yells back. He and Ezekiel Thornfield were helping us build a case against Blackwood. They gathered evidence, enough to hang his entire organization. Ezekiel hid it here, in this lodge, before Blackwood got to him. A bombshell. Ezekiel wasn't just a kind old man who took her in. He was an investigator. He and her father, a Pinkerton detective, were partners. They weren't hiding from the world. They were using this lodge as a base of operations to take down the most powerful criminal in the territory. And Ezekiel's death, it likely wasn't pneumonia at all. The journal proves your innocence, Wayncroft shouts. And it leads us to the evidence. Let us in, Cassandra. We're on your side. Magnus looks at her, his mind racing. Could it be true? Or was this an elaborate trap? A lie designed to get them to lower their guard before the slaughter begins. He's been hunting Blackwood for 2 years. He's never heard of any Marshal Wayncroft. But Cassandra, she sees a glimmer of hope, a chance to clear her name, to find justice for the murdered clerk, and to finally understand what her father died for. She makes a decision. She walks to the door, her hands shaking as she reaches for the heavy wooden bar. No, Magnus says, grabbing her arm. It's too risky. It's the only chance we have, she replies, her emerald eyes pleading with him. If that journal is real. The heavy bar lifts. The lock turns. The door creaks open. 3 men stand on the porch, their faces grim in the moonlight. They wear the badges of U.S. Marshals. They look legitimate, but something is wrong, terribly wrong. Magnus sees it first. It's a small detail. A glint of metal on the middleman's boot. A silver spur, carved in the shape of a rattlesnake. He'd seen a spur like that once before. On the body of a dead man in a dusty Pueblo alley 2 years ago. On the body of his brother, Thomas. These aren't marshals. They're Blackwood's killers. The world slows down. The click of 3 hammers being cocked is deafening in the sudden silence. Cassandra realizes her mistake a second too late. The men's faces twist into cruel smiles. They've won. They've tricked her. But they didn't count on Magnus Thornfield. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't shout a warning. He acts. He shoves Cassandra to the floor, out of the line of fire, and draws his Colt in a single, fluid motion. The night explodes in a cacophony of gunfire. Muzzle flashes illuminate the porch in strobing, hellish light. Wood splinters from the doorframe as bullets rip through the air. The lead marshal grunts, a red flower blooming on his chest as Magnus's first shot finds its mark. He stumbles backward, his own gun firing wildly into the night sky. Cassandra scrambles behind a heavy oak table, her mind reeling from the betrayal. She brings her Winchester up, the familiar weight of comfort in the chaos. She sights on the second man, the one with the rattlesnake spurs, and squeezes the trigger. The rifle bucks against her shoulder. The man cries out, clutching his arm as the bullet tears through his bicep, causing him to drop his pistol. The third man dives for cover behind the porch railing, returning fire into the darkened lodge. Magnus feels a searing pain in his side as a bullet grazes his ribs. He grits his teeth, ignoring the fire spreading through his torso, and fires twice more. One shot goes wide, but the second catches the third man in the leg. It's a stalemate. 2 wounded men outside, 2 trapped people inside. But they know it won't last. The escaped killer will ride back to Pueblo. He'll tell Blackwood where they are. And Blackwood won't send 3 men next time. He'll send 30. We have to go. Now, Magnus yells, reloading his Colt with shaking hands. His side is bleeding freely now, soaking his shirt. Go where? Cassandra cries. The whole territory wants me dead. They're not after you, Magnus shouts back, the pieces of the puzzle finally slamming together in his mind. Don't you see? The frame-up, the lies about the journal. It was all just to get inside the lodge. He looks around the room, his eyes scanning every log, every floorboard. Ezekiel hid something here, something Blackwood is desperate to find. The evidence your father and my uncle collected. It has to be here. The man with the wounded arm, the one with the rattlesnake spurs, starts shouting from the porch. It's over, Thornfield. Give it up. The sheriff knows everything. He knows about the silver load. The silver load. The words drop into the tense silence of the lodge like a boulder into a still pond. This was never about a robbery. It was never even about silencing a witness. It was about something far, far bigger. It was about a fortune. Ezekiel's folly, Cassandra whispers, her eyes wide with dawning comprehension. The old man was always talking about it. A crazy story about a mountain of silver he'd found. Everyone thought he was just a crazy old prospector. He wasn't crazy, Magnus says, a grim understanding settling over him. He found it, the richest silver strike in Colorado. And your father, the Pinkerton, he was helping him secure the claim legally. That's what their investigation was really about. Blackwood didn't kill the Wells Fargo clerk for a few $1,000s. He killed him to steal the deed to the mine, the deed that was being held in the Wells Fargo safe. And the evidence? It wasn't just about corruption. It was proof of ownership, maps, assays, the legal claim. Everything Blackwood needed to become the richest, most powerful man in the West. And it was hidden somewhere in this lodge. Outside, the man with the spurs starts laughing, a crazed, pain-filled sound. The sheriff owns this mountain now. He owns you. He'll tear this place apart log by log until he finds it. They're out of time. They have minutes, maybe an hour, before Blackwood's army descends on them. They can't run, and they can't stay. There's only one path left. We have to find it first, Magnus says, his jaw set. We have to find that evidence and use it against him. It's our only weapon. But where to look? The lodge is filled with a lifetime of Ezekiel's possessions. It could be anywhere. Under the floorboards, in the chimney, hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Then Cassandra's eyes land on the massive stone fireplace. It's the heart of the lodge, built by Ezekiel himself. And she remembers something the old man used to say, tapping the hearthstone with his cane. The warmest place is always the safest. The fireplace, she says, her voice filled with a sudden, certain conviction. The hearthstone. Together they rush to the fireplace. Magnus takes an iron poker, jamming it into the crack between the hearthstone and the floorboards. He puts his full weight on it. The stone is massive, set deep. For a moment, nothing happens. Then with a low groan, the stone shifts. Beneath it is a hollowed-out compartment, and inside that compartment is a heavy oilskin-wrapped parcel. They found it. With trembling hands, Cassandra lifts the package out. Inside is a leather-bound ledger, her father's journal, and a bundle of official-looking documents. The deed, the maps, the assays, everything. A quick glance at the journal confirms their worst fears. It details Blackwood's entire operation. Names, dates, payoffs. It's a confession in her father's meticulous handwriting, but it also details the mine, a geological treasure beyond their wildest dreams. This ledger can bring down an empire, or build one. But as they stare at their prize, a new sound reaches them, the splintering of wood from the back of the lodge. The wounded man with the spurs. He wasn't just waiting. He was creating a diversion. While they were focused on the front, the other wounded man snuck around the back. A shadowy figure bursts through a shattered window, his gun raised. It's the third man, the one Magnus shot in the leg. He's limping heavily, his face a mask of pain and fury. He's not aiming at Magnus. He's aiming at Cassandra, at the parcel in her hands. There's no time to think, no time to aim. Magnus reacts on pure instinct. He throws himself in front of Cassandra, shielding her with his own body. The gun roars. The world explodes in a starburst of white-hot agony. Magnus feels the impact, a brutal punch to his chest that throws him backward. He hits the floor hard, the air driven from his lungs. The oilskin parcel scatters across the floorboards. He can't breathe. His vision tunnels. The last thing he sees before the darkness takes him is Cassandra's horrified face, her mouth open in a silent scream, and the man with the gun, limping towards the scattered papers, a triumphant sneer on his face. He's failed. Blackwood has won. The darkness closes in. Silence. Then a single, sharp crack of a rifle shot echoes through the lodge. Magnus fights his way back to consciousness, pulled from the abyss by a searing pain in his chest. He gasps for air, his lungs on fire. He opens his eyes. The room is spinning. The man who shot him is lying face down on the floor, a dark pool spreading out from under him. He's not moving, and Cassandra is standing over him, the Winchester still smoking in her hands. Her face is pale, streaked with grime and tears, but her eyes are blazing with a cold, righteous fury. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She acted. She saved his life. She rushes to his side. Magnus! Magnus, stay with me! He tries to speak, but only a bloody cough escapes his lips. He looks down. There's a hole in his chest, high on his shoulder. It's bad, but it missed his heart. He's alive. For now. The other one, he rasps. Gone, she says, quickly gathering the scattered papers. He ran when he heard the shot. He'll be back, with friends. She's right. They've won the battle, but the war is far from over. And their one advantage, the element of surprise, is gone. Blackwood knows they have the evidence. He'll stop at nothing to get it back. Cassandra rips a strip of cloth from a curtain, pressing it hard against Magnus's wound. He cries out in pain. We have to get you out of here, she says, her voice firm, taking charge. You're losing too much blood. No, Magnus gasps, grabbing her arm. The evidence. Pueblo. We have to. We will, she says, her eyes locking with his. But you're no good to me dead, Thornfield. First we survive, then we get justice. She helps him to his feet. Every movement is agony. The world sways and he leans heavily on her. This fierce, brave woman who he met only hours ago is now the only thing keeping him from collapsing. They stumble out of the lodge, leaving the dead men where they fell. The cool night air hits Magnus's face, clearing his head slightly. The storm has passed completely, leaving a sky full of brilliant, indifferent stars. They only have one horse, Magnus's stallion. Getting them both on it will be a challenge. But as they reach the animal, Magnus sees something that makes his blood run even colder than it already is. Tied to the saddle of one of the dead marshals is a roll of canvas, a poster, a wanted poster. He limps over, his heart pounding a painful rhythm against his broken ribs. He unrolls it, and his world falls apart for the second time that night. It's a wanted poster, crisp and new. It offers a $5,000 reward, but the face on it isn't Cassandra's. It's his. Wanted, Magnus Thornfield. For armed robbery and the murder of Deputy Marshal Thomas Thornfield. Murder of his own brother. It's a lie. A venomous, impossible lie. But it's a brilliant one. Blackwood hasn't just framed Cassandra. He's framed Magnus, too. He's twisted Magnus's quest for vengeance into a motive for murder, a story of greed, of two brothers fighting over an inheritance, ending in bloodshed. Who would believe his word against a respected sheriff? He's a drifter, a nobody. Now he's a wanted killer. There is no one they can turn to, no lawman who will help them. They are completely, utterly alone. Every man's hand is now turned against them. They aren't just fugitives. They're the villains of the story. Cassandra stares at the poster, her face a mask of horror. This is impossible. It's smart, Magnus grits out, the pain from his wound momentarily forgotten, replaced by a white-hot rage. He's cut us off from everyone. We're ghosts now. No allies, no sanctuary. They are trapped, hunted, their names poisoned. Blackwood has played his hand perfectly. He has them cornered. Any move they make will only tighten the noose. For a moment, despair threatens to overwhelm them. The mountain, once a sanctuary, now feels like a tomb. The odds are impossible. The enemy is everywhere. But then Magnus looks at Cassandra. He sees the fire in her eyes has not been extinguished. It's burning brighter than ever. She's not beaten, and neither is he. So we stay ghosts, she says, her voice low and dangerous. Ghosts have nothing to lose. Ghosts can't be caught, and ghosts can haunt people. A grim smile touches Magnus's lips. She's right. Blackwood thinks he's won. He thinks he's broken them. But he's made a fatal mistake. He's taken everything from them. And in doing so, he's made them more dangerous than he could ever imagine. With Cassandra's help, Magnus pulls himself onto his horse. The pain is blinding, but his resolve is like steel. She hands him the oilskin parcel, the evidence that has cost them so much. Then she unties one of the dead men's horses and swings into the saddle. They don't ride down the mountain towards civilization. They ride up, deeper into the wilderness, deeper into the shadows. They have a new plan. They can't go to the law, so they'll go to the lawless. Blackwood's empire is built on a network of criminals, cutthroats, and corrupt officials, all of them held together by greed and fear. They will use that to their advantage. They will use the ledger. They will turn Blackwood's own people against him. They will offer them a better deal, a piece of a silver mine in exchange for their loyalty, or a bullet in the back if they refuse. They will not fight a war. They will start a mutiny. They will become the very monsters Blackwood has accused them of being, and they will tear his empire down from the inside out, one piece of rotten wood at a time. Their quest for justice is over. Their hunt for revenge has just begun. They found a temporary refuge in an old abandoned trapper's cabin high up in the peaks, a place so remote it wasn't on any map. There, under the flickering light of a tallow candle, Cassandra tended to Magnus's wounds. The bullet had gone clean through his shoulder, a miracle of bad aim. It was painful, but it wouldn't kill him. Not if the infection didn't. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, earning a pained groan from Magnus, and bound it tightly with strips of her own petticoat. As she worked, they laid out the contents of the oilskin parcel. The ledger was a bombshell. Her father's precise script filled page after page with damning detail. It wasn't just a list of names. It was a blueprint of Blackwood's entire criminal enterprise. It listed every bribe paid to Mayor Hutchkins, every case thrown by Judge Patterson, every false death certificate signed by Doc Brennan. It even detailed the secret routes used to smuggle the stolen silver ore out of the territory. But the most important discovery was a hidden notation at the back, a list of 3 names under the heading Contingency. These were men inside Blackwood's own circle, men her father had identified as potential weak links, men who were either in too deep and looking for a way out, or greedy enough to betray their boss for a bigger prize. Jake Morrison, one of Blackwood's own deputies. Silas Croft, the owner of the Silver Dollar Saloon where Blackwood held his meetings, and a man known only as the Preacher, who ran a smuggling ring out of the old Spanish mission. These were not good men. They were killers, thieves, and liars. But they were their only hope. "This is our army," Magnus rasped, tapping a bloody finger on the list. "We can't fight Blackwood head-on, but we can set his own dogs on him." "How?" Cassandra asked. "They'll shoot us on sight. They think we're murderers." "Money talks louder than wanted posters," Magnus said, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity that was part pain, part inspiration. "We don't have money, but we have something better." He held up the deed to the silver load. "We have a kingdom, and we can offer them a piece of it." The plan was audacious, suicidal even. They would go back to Pueblo, not skulking in the shadows, but walking right into the hornet's nest. They would approach each of these 3 men, one by one. They would use the ledger as a threat and the deed as a promise. "Join us, and you'll be richer than you ever dreamed. Refuse, and this ledger goes straight to the territorial governor. You'll hang alongside Blackwood." It was a gamble that pitted fear against greed. They waited 2 days, giving Magnus time to regain a sliver of his strength. They ate jerky and stale biscuits, poring over the maps in the ledger, memorizing every detail, planning every move. In those 2 days, a profound change occurred between them. The lines of stranger and ally blurred. They were 2 parts of a single desperate organism, bound by a shared purpose. On the 3rd night, they rode down from the mountain under the cover of a new moon. Pueblo was a splash of lamplight in the vast darkness, a town held captive by the man they'd come to destroy. Their first target was Jake Morrison, Blackwood's deputy. According to the ledger, Morrison was ambitious and resentful of his partner, the more thuggish Pete Kellerman. Her father noted that Morrison saw himself as Blackwood's heir apparent, but feared Blackwood would never step aside. They found him not at the sheriff's office, but at a back table of a cheap brothel, just as the ledger predicted. Cassandra went in alone. A woman would attract less immediate suspicion. She found Morrison drowning his ambitions in cheap whiskey. She slid into the chair opposite him, placing a single folded page from the ledger on the table between them. It was the page detailing Morrison's own crimes. The bank robbery in Kansas, the price on his head. He looked up, his eyes instantly cold and sober. "Who the hell are you?" "A ghost," she said softly. "And I've come to offer you a choice. A rope or a silver mine." An hour later, Cassandra walked out of the brothel. Morrison had agreed to a secret meeting with Magnus the next night. The first piece was in play. Next was Silas Croft, the saloon owner. Croft was a pragmatist, a businessman whose only loyalty was to the bottom line. The ledger showed that Blackwood was squeezing him, demanding an ever larger cut of the saloon's profits. Croft was a powder keg of resentment, waiting for a spark. Magnus, his arm in a sling and his hat pulled low, delivered that spark. He cornered Croft in his own cellar as he was tapping a keg of beer. Magnus didn't show him the ledger. He showed him the assay reports from the mine, numbers that promised a fortune beyond Croft's wildest imaginings. "Blackwood is giving you scraps," Magnus said, his voice a low growl. "We're offering you the whole feast. All you have to do is unlock the back door during his next meeting. Let our friends in." Croft, his eyes wide with avarice, didn't even hesitate. The second piece was in play. The final piece was the most dangerous. The preacher. He was an enigma, a man who quoted scripture while orchestrating brutal smuggling runs. He was the muscle of the operation, controlling a dozen hardened men. He feared no one, not even Blackwood. They found him in the ruins of the old mission, holding a sermon for his gang of thieves. This time, they went together. They walked right into the crumbling church, the eyes of a dozen outlaws upon them. The preacher stopped his sermon, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "The wanted ghosts, $5,000 walking right into my chapel. It seems the Lord does provide." "The Lord provides silver, preacher," Magnus said, holding up the deed. "And Blackwood plans on keeping it all for himself. We have proof he's been skimming from your smuggling profits. We have proof he plans to have you and your men ambushed and killed once the mine is fully operational. He's tying up loose ends." He tossed the ledger onto the dusty altar. "Read it for yourself. It's all in there. Or you can kill us, collect your $5,000, and wait for Blackwood's bullet." The preacher picked up the ledger. The silence in the church was absolute as he read. His face, once amused, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He had been played for a fool. He closed the book. "The sheriff has made a covenant with death," he said, his voice booming through the ruins. "And his agreement with the grave will not stand." He looked at Magnus and Cassandra. "Tell us what you need us to do." The final piece fell into place. The mutiny was set. The plan was simple, brutal, and timed to perfection. In 2 days, Blackwood was scheduled to meet with his entire inner circle at the Silver Dollar Saloon to finalize the takeover of the mine. Silas Croft would unlock the back door. Jake Morrison, on duty inside, would signal them when Blackwood was distracted, and the preacher and his men would be the hammer. Magnus and Cassandra would be there, not to fight, but to witness, to ensure the ledger and the deed, the symbols of their victory, were recovered from the aftermath. The night of the meeting, the air in Pueblo was thick with tension. Magnus and Cassandra watched from a dark alley across the street as Blackwood and his cronies, Judge Patterson, Mayor Hutchkins, Doc Brennan, and the brutal deputy Pete Kellerman, filed into the saloon. They waited. Every second felt like an hour. Then a lamp in the saloon's upper window flickered twice. It was Morrison's signal. From the shadows at the end of the street, the preacher and his men emerged, moving like wraiths towards the back of the saloon. Silas Croft had kept his word. The back door was open. What happened next was not a gunfight. It was an execution. Shouts of surprise turned into screams of agony. Gunshots erupted, not the clean crack of a duel, but the messy, thunderous roar of a massacre. For a full minute, the saloon was a charnel house. And then, silence. The preacher emerged from the front door, his face splattered with blood. He looked across the street directly at Magnus and gave a single, slow nod. It was done. Blackwood's empire had fallen. But as Magnus and Cassandra stepped out of the alley, ready to reclaim their lives, they saw two figures stumble out of the saloon's back entrance. It was Jake Morrison, the turncoat deputy, and he was helping a wounded, bleeding Sheriff Blackwood, who was leaning on him for support. It was a double cross. Morrison had never been on their side. He used them. He used the preacher to eliminate all of his rivals, including his partner Kellerman, in one fell swoop. Now, with Blackwood wounded and indebted to him, Morrison was poised to take control of the entire operation. He had played them all. "I'll take that ledger now," Morrison said, leveling his pistol at Magnus. Blackwood was slumped against the wall, a cruel, bloody smile on his face. "You were a fool to trust anyone, Thornfield," Blackwood rasped. This was it, the final betrayal. After everything they had been through, they had failed. They had only succeeded in replacing one tyrant with another. But they had forgotten about one thing. The one thing her father had taught her. Always have a contingency for your contingency. Cassandra had never trusted Morrison. During their meeting at the brothel, she had seen the way his eyes lingered on her. She had sensed an untempered ambition that went beyond mere survival. So she and Magnus had planned for this. Magnus smiled, a real, genuine smile. "You're right, Sheriff. I was a fool." He looked past Morrison. "But she isn't." From the rooftop of the building behind the saloon, a single rifle shot rang out. It wasn't Cassandra. She was standing right next to Magnus. It was a figure they had not accounted for. An old man, silhouetted against the moon. Ezekiel Thornfield. He wasn't dead. The bullet hit Morrison square in the back. He gasped, his eyes wide with shock, and crumpled to the ground, dead before he hit the dirt. Blackwood stared, his mind unable to process what had just happened. He looked from the dead Morrison to the figure on the roof, then back to Magnus. "But you're dead," Blackwood stammered at the rooftop figure. "Pneumonia is rarely fatal when the doctor signing your death certificate is a trusted friend." Ezekiel's voice drifted down, calm and clear. "Isn't that right, Doc Brennan?" It was the final, unbelievable twist. Ezekiel had faked his own death, with the help of one of the very men on Blackwood's payroll. A man who, it turned out, was an old army buddy. He had been watching, waiting, letting Magnus and Cassandra draw all the snakes out of the grass before he revealed himself. He had been the ultimate ghost, pulling the strings from beyond the grave. He had let them risk their lives, let them walk through fire, all as part of his master plan. Blackwood, disarmed and broken, could only stare in defeat. The preacher and his men emerged from the saloon, their weapons trained on the fallen sheriff. The town was theirs. In the aftermath, the truth came out. Ezekiel, Magnus, and Cassandra presented the ledger to the territorial governor, who, faced with irrefutable proof, had no choice but to clean house. The wanted posters were torn down. Their names were cleared. The silver load was theirs, a fortune that could reshape their futures. Weeks later, the three of them stood on the porch of the mountain lodge. The air was clean, the valley peaceful. The war was over. Ezekiel explained how he and Cassandra's father had been working for years to bring Blackwood down, and how his fake death was the final, desperate gambit to protect the evidence and draw the enemy into a trap. He looked at Magnus, his eyes filled with a gruff pride. "Your brother would be proud of you, son." Magnus looked at Cassandra. In the crucible of violence and betrayal, they had forged a bond stronger than steel. The question of what now hung unspoken in the air between them. They were no longer fugitives, no longer ghosts. They could be anything they wanted to be. "The lodge belongs to you now, Magnus," Ezekiel said. Magnus shook his head. He looked at Cassandra, at the fierce, beautiful woman who had saved his life and fought by his side. "No," he said softly. "I think it belongs to us." The story of the ghosts of Pueblo became a legend in the territory, a tale of how two hunted fugitives, with nothing but courage and a dead man's journal, brought down an empire. They had faced down the worst of humanity and emerged from the darkness, not unscathed, but unbroken. They had fought for justice, and in the end, they had found something more. They had found a home. They chose to stay in the mountains, running the mine fairly and using its wealth to help build a better, more honest town from the ashes of the old one. They had earned their peace, and they intended to keep it. This story is a powerful reminder that even when the odds are stacked against you, when the whole world believes you're the villain, The truth is a weapon that can't be buried forever. The courage of just one or two people can be enough to topple the most corrupt empires. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, and you want to hear more tales where the underdog gets to bite back, do us a favor. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. You belong to me now. That's what she said. A man named Magnus Thornfield rides for 6 days, a piece of paper in his pocket telling him he owns a mountain lodge. He's come to claim his inheritance, but when he gets there, he sees smoke rising from the chimney. Someone is already inside. He swings off his horse, and the front door creaks open before he can even knock. A young woman stands there. She's got fire in her eyes and a Winchester rifle in her hands, and the barrel is aimed directly at his heart. She chambers around, and the click-clack of the rifle is the only sound on the mountain. And then she speaks 5 words that change everything. You belong to me now. Magnus raises his hands real slow. This is no frightened girl. This is a survivor. He tells her his name, tells her his uncle Ezekiel left him the place. He's got the papers to prove it. Her eyes, the color of hard emeralds, don't even blink. Ezekiel never mentioned a nephew, she says, her voice as cold as a winter wind. Papers can be forged. This place is mine now. The tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. A storm is brewing over the peaks, and Magnus feels like he's just walked right into the middle of it. He tells her he's not there to hurt her. She looks him up and down, searching his face for a lie, and he can see a deep, painful exhaustion in her eyes. This woman hasn't had a peaceful night's sleep in a long, long time. Finally, she lowers the rifle, just an inch. Wipe your boots, she says, and steps aside. It's not an invitation, it's a command. He steps inside, and it's like walking into a fortress. Everything is heavy, solid. The air smells of wood smoke and secrets. She tells him Ezekiel saved her life. She's been there for 3 months, alone. But Magnus is no fool. He sees the way she never lets the rifle get too far from her hand. He sees the way she keeps glancing out the windows, scanning the tree line. This isn't a home, it's a hideout. What are you running from? He asks, his voice low. She laughs, a bitter, broken sound. Better lonely than dead, she says. He knows that feeling. He pushes her. You're not just hiding up here. You're fortified. Who are you fortified against? And that's when her mask finally cracks. The fight drains out of her, and she sinks into a chair, looking impossibly young. Men who think they own things that can't be owned, she whispers. Men who don't like being told no. He knows exactly what kind of men she means. The kind that hide their evil behind a tin badge. She says the name, and the name itself seems to poison the air in the room. Sheriff Blackwood. The name hits Magnus like a punch to the gut. Sheriff Blackwood of Pueblo, a man whose reputation for cruelty was a legend in the territory. A man who ruled his town with an iron fist and a shallow grave. Crossing him was a death sentence. The young woman, her name is Cassandra, tells him everything. She saw Blackwood and his deputies rob the Wells Fargo. She saw them murder the young clerk in cold blood. She went to the federal marshal to testify, to do the right thing. 2 days later, the marshal was found dead in an alley. So she ran. She ran until her horse gave out, until she was half dead in a snowstorm. That's when Ezekiel found her. He brought her to his lodge, to the sanctuary, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. She's been there ever since, not living, just surviving. You can't hide here forever, Magnus tells her. Why not? She shoots back. My whole life is looking over my shoulder. That's not a life. It's a cage. He turns to face her, and for the first time, she sees something in his eyes. Something cold and hard and incredibly dangerous. What if there was another way, he asks. She's suspicious. What are you? Some kind of bounty hunter? What makes you think you can succeed where a federal marshal failed? He looks at her, and the expression on his face sends a shiver down her spine. Let's just say, he says, his voice a low growl, I have some experience dealing with men like Blackwood. The kind of experience that usually ends with them in a pine box. This isn't just some drifter who stumbled into her life. This man is a hunter, and he didn't come to this mountain by accident. He came here looking for a fight. You're talking about murder, she whispers. I'm talking about justice, he corrects her. Sometimes they look the same. He tells her she's not the only one Blackwood has wronged. He says the sheriff took something from him too. And that's when he delivers the first twist, the one that changes everything. He killed my brother. The two words land like a body hitting the floor. Suddenly, all the pieces click into place. His brother Thomas was a deputy marshal. He was investigating Blackwood 2 years ago. He sent Magnus a letter saying he was close to exposing the whole rotten operation. 2 days later, Thomas was dead. This isn't a chance encounter. It's fate, or something much darker. Magnus didn't come for the lodge. The lodge was just his excuse. He came for revenge. Finding Cassandra here, the only other living witness against Blackwood, it wasn't a complication. It was an opportunity. He proposes a partnership. Her knowledge of Blackwood's operation, his skills as a hunter. Together, they could finish what her father and his brother started. The idea is terrifying. But the thought of fighting back, after months of hiding in fear, it's liberating. All right, Thornfield, she says, a new fire in her eyes. You've got a partner. They seal the deal with a glass of whiskey, a pact made in the heart of a storm, a promise of vengeance. But just as they lower their glasses, a new sound cuts through the night. It's not the wind. It's not the thunder. It's the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats, and they're coming fast. Instantly, the fragile hope shatters. They grab their weapons. At least 4 riders pushing their horses hard up the slick mountain trail. They're not lost travelers. They're hunting. Cassandra peers through the curtains and her blood runs cold. They're not carrying lanterns, she whispers. They know the trail. They've been here before. The riders pull up. A fist hammers on the door. Cassandra McKenna, a voice booms. This is Marshal Wayncroft, United States Marshal Service. We have a warrant for your arrest. Arrest, it makes no sense. But then the man delivers the next blow. A warrant for the murder of Elias Vance at the Pueblo Wells Fargo. It's a frame-up. A vicious, brilliant frame-up. Blackwood isn't just trying to kill her. He's turning her into the villain. If she's a wanted murderer, her testimony against him is worthless. But then the marshal yells something else. Something that changes the game completely. We have your father's journal, Cassandra. We know you came here to find what Ezekiel hid. Her father's journal? The one he died with? And what did Ezekiel hide? Before Magnus can stop her, she demands to know how they knew her father. He was working with us, the marshal shouts back. He and Ezekiel were gathering evidence against Blackwood, enough to hang his whole crew. Ezekiel hid it here in this lodge. It's an absolute bombshell. Ezekiel wasn't just a kind old hermit. He and her father were partners, investigators, using this lodge as a secret base to take down Blackwood. And his death, it probably wasn't pneumonia at all. This could be their salvation, or it could be a deadly trap. Against Magnus's warnings, Cassandra opens the door. 3 men stand on the porch, wearing the badges of U.S. Marshals. They look legitimate, but Magnus sees something. A tiny detail, a silver spur on one man's boot, carved in the shape of a rattlesnake. He's seen that spur before, 2 years ago, on the body of his dead brother. They're not marshals. They're Blackwood's killers. The world explodes in gunfire. Magnus shoves Cassandra to the floor as bullets rip through the doorframe. He draws his Colt, firing back in a blur of motion. The lead man goes down. Cassandra brings her Winchester up, firing from behind a heavy table, wounding the second man, the one with the spurs. The third man returns fire, and a bullet grazes Magnus's side, a line of fire across his ribs. The fight is brutal, fast, and desperate. They manage to down the third man, but the one with the spurs, though wounded, scrambles away into the darkness. He's gone. Gone to tell Blackwood exactly where they are. They're out of time. But in the middle of the chaos, the killer's words echo in Magnus's head. He knows about the silver load. Suddenly, it all makes sense. This was never about a simple robbery. It was about a fortune. Ezekiel hadn't just been a hermit. He'd been a prospector. He'd found the richest silver strike in Colorado. The robbery at the Wells Fargo wasn't for the cash in the vault. It was to steal the deed to the mine. And the evidence Ezekiel and her father gathered, it's all connected. It's proof of Blackwood's crimes and proof of ownership of the mine. and it's hidden somewhere in this lodge. Cassandra remembers something Ezekiel used to say, tapping the giant hearthstone in front of the fireplace. The warmest place is always the safest. They jam a poker under the stone and heave. With a groan, it moves, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside is an oilskin package. They found it. A ledger detailing Blackwood's entire operation. Maps to the mine. The deed itself. But just as they grab it, the last of Blackwood's wounded men bursts through a back window, his gun raised. He's not aiming at Magnus. He's aiming at Cassandra and the parcel in her hands. Magnus doesn't think. He acts. He throws himself in front of her. The gun roars. The world explodes in white-hot pain as the bullet slams into his chest. He hits the floor, the air knocked from his lungs, the precious papers scattering around him. The last thing he sees is the killer limping toward the evidence, a triumphant sneer on his face. He failed. But then, a single sharp crack from a Winchester rifle echoes through the room. When Magnus comes to, the gunman is dead on the floor. Cassandra is standing over him, rifle smoking, her eyes blazing with fury. She saved his life, but they're not safe. The other killer got away. Blackwood's entire gang will be on their way. They stumble outside, Magnus leaning heavily on Cassandra. His chest is on fire, and that's when he sees it. On the saddle of one of the dead men's horses, a poster, a wanted poster. But the face on it isn't Cassandra's. It's his. Wanted Magnus Thornfield. For armed robbery and the murder of Deputy Marshal Thomas Thornfield. It's the ultimate betrayal. Blackwood hasn't just framed Cassandra. He's twisted Magnus's entire quest for vengeance into a motive for murder. A story of two brothers fighting, ending in bloodshed. No one will ever believe them now. Every lawman, every bounty hunter, every citizen will be looking for them. They are completely, utterly alone. They are the villains of the story now. But as they stare at the poster, despair turning to ice in their veins, they realize something. Blackwood thinks he's cornered them. He thinks he's won. But he's made one fatal mistake. He's taken everything from them. Their names, their freedom, their hope for justice. And when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous thing in the world. So we stay ghost, Cassandra says, her voice low and hard as steel. Ghosts can't be caught, and ghosts can haunt people. They ride not down the mountain towards civilization, but up, deeper into the wilderness, deeper into the shadows. Their quest for justice is over. Their hunt for revenge has just begun. They find refuge in an abandoned cabin high in the peaks. Cassandra patches Magnus's shoulder wound. The bullet went clean through. Another miracle in a night full of them. As he heals, they study the ledger. It's a blueprint of Blackwood's empire, listing every bribe, every crooked deal, every murder. And at the back, a list. 3 names. Men inside Blackwood's own circle that Cassandra's father believed could be turned. Jake Morrison, a resentful deputy, Silas Croft, a greedy saloon owner, and a mysterious figure known only as the preacher, who ran a smuggling ring. This is their new plan, a suicidal, audacious plan. They will go back to Pueblo. They will walk right into the hornet's nest. They will use the ledger as a threat and the deed to the silver mine as a promise. They will turn Blackwood's own men against him, igniting a civil war from within his organization. They ride down from the mountain like avenging angels. Cassandra, posing as a desperate woman, approaches Morrison in a brothel. She shows him the page from the ledger detailing his own crimes. Then she offers him a choice, a hangman's rope or a share of a silver mine. He agrees to help. Magnus, his arm in a sling, corners Croft in his cellar. He doesn't show him the ledger. He shows him the assay reports from the mine, numbers that promise an unimaginable fortune. Croft, blinded by greed, agrees to unlock the saloon's back door during Blackwood's next big meeting. Finally, they confront the preacher in the ruins of an old church, surrounded by his gang of cutthroats. They show him proof that Blackwood has been cheating him and plans to have him killed. The preacher, a man who fears nothing, sees the truth. He pledges his men to their cause. The trap is set. The night of the meeting, Pueblo is a powder keg waiting for a spark. Magnus and Cassandra watch from a dark alley as Blackwood and his entire inner circle gather at the Silver Dollar Saloon. A lamp flickers in an upstairs window. It's Morrison's signal. The preacher and his men storm the saloon from the back. The night erupts in a massacre. For a full minute, the saloon is a slaughterhouse. Then silence. The preacher emerges, covered in blood, and gives Magnus a single nod. It's done. But as they step out of the alley, two figures stumble out the back door of the saloon. It's Jake Morrison, and he's helping a wounded, bleeding Sheriff Blackwood. It was a double cross. Morrison used them. He used the preacher to eliminate all of his rivals at once. Now, with Blackwood wounded and indebted to him, Morrison is the new king. He played them all. "I'll take that ledger now," Morrison says, leveling his pistol. It's over. They failed. They only managed to replace one monster with another. But they forgot one thing. A contingency. A ghost they didn't know they had. From a rooftop across the street, a single rifle shot cracks the night. Morrison crumples to the ground, a bullet in his back. Blackwood stares in disbelief. Magnus and Cassandra look up. On the roof is a silhouette against the moon. An old man. It's Ezekiel Thornfield. He's not dead. The final, impossible twist. Ezekiel had faked his own death. He'd been watching, waiting, using Magnus and Cassandra as the bait to draw all the snakes out of the grass at once. He was the puppet master all along. With Blackwood captured and his organization shattered, the truth finally comes out. The ledger is delivered to the governor. Their names are cleared. The mine is theirs. Weeks later, they stand on the porch of the lodge, finally at peace. The war is over. Magnus looks at Cassandra, this fierce, incredible woman who fought by his side. They had been through hell together. "The lodge belongs to you now, Magnus," Ezekiel says. Magnus shakes his head, his eyes never leaving Cassandra's. "No," he says, "I think it belongs to us." The story of the ghosts of Pueblo became a legend, a reminder that even when the world calls you a villain, the courage of two people can be enough to burn an empire to the ground. They had fought for justice, but in the end, they found something more. They found a home. This story shows that no matter how dark things get, no matter how impossible the odds, you can never count out those who have nothing left to lose. If you enjoyed this story of relentless twists and ultimate justice, do yourself a favor. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you won't want to miss the stories we have coming up.